she stood in the middle of her living room with her hands pressed against her temples, staring at the absolute destruction around her, glass shards scattered across the hardwood floor, the curtains ripped from their rods, a ceramic vase her grandmother gave her shattered into 100 pieces, and in the corner of the room sat Duke, her 4-year-old German shepherd, panting heavily with wide eyes and what looked like guilt written all over his face, and without thinking, without pausing, she pointed at him and shouted, "What did you do?" her voice cracking with frustration because this was supposed to be a normal Saturday, this was supposed to be easy, and now everything was ruined because of him. At least that's what she believed in that moment, that her dog had lost his mind and torn apart her home for no reason, but she couldn't have been more wrong. And what she was about to discover would haunt her for the rest of her life in the most beautiful and heartbreaking way imaginable. Let me take you back to how this day really started, because the truth doesn't make sense unless you understand what was happening behind the scenes, the things she didn't notice, the things she was too busy to see. Her name was Jenna, 34 years old, a single mom of 2 kids, 8-year-old Lily and 5-year-old Marcus, and she had been running on fumes for weeks, juggling a demanding remote job while trying to keep up with school schedules and laundry piles and a house that never seemed to stay clean no matter how hard she tried. Duke had been part of the family since before the kids could walk, a rescue she adopted when he was just 10 weeks old, and from the moment Lily was born, that dog had appointed himself as her guardian, sleeping outside her nursery door every single night, following her from room to room like a shadow, and doing the same thing when Marcus came along 2 years later. Jenna always said Duke loved those kids more than he loved her, and she was probably right, but over the years, as life got busier and responsibilities piled up, Duke became more of a background presence, someone she fed and let outside but rarely stopped to really see. That Saturday morning started like most others. Jenna woke up late after a rough night of deadlines, the kids were already awake and playing in the living room, and Duke was doing his usual thing, lying near the back door, watching the yard through the glass like he was standing guard over something only he could sense. Jenna didn't think much of it. She poured herself coffee, scrolled through emails, and reminded the kids to keep the noise down while she finished one last work task in her home office just down the hall. The house was old, a 1970s build she inherited from her parents, charming but full of quirks, creaky floors, drafty windows, and a basement she never really used because it gave her the creeps. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that something had been silently going wrong in the walls for days, a slow gas leak from an aging pipe connected to the furnace in the basement, invisible, odorless in small amounts, but growing stronger with every passing hour. Duke had been acting strange all week, whining at odd hours, refusing to eat his food, pacing through the house like he was looking for something that wasn't there, and Jenna assumed he was just being dramatic. Maybe he had an upset stomach, maybe he wanted more attention. She didn't have time to figure it out. But Duke wasn't being dramatic, he was trying to warn her, in the only way a dog knows how, through behavior that humans too often misread as misbehavior. That morning, as Jenna sat in her office clicking through spreadsheets, Duke started acting even more unusual than before. He kept getting up and walking to the hallway that led to the kids, then circling back to Jenna's office, whining low in his throat, pawing at her chair, and she pushed him away with her foot, muttering for him to go lie down, not realizing that he was trying to tell her something was deeply wrong. The kids were playing near the back of the living room, close to the vent that connected to the basement, and while they laughed and stacked blocks and made up stories with their toys, they had no idea that the air around them was slowly becoming more dangerous by the minute. Duke could smell it, that faint chemical sharpness that human noses couldn't yet detect, and every instinct in his body told him to get those kids away from that space, so he did the only thing he could. He started to act. First, he nudged Lily, pushing his nose into her side and trying to guide her toward the front of the house, but she giggled and pushed him away, thinking it was a game. Then he grabbed Marcus's shirt gently with his teeth, tugging him backward, but Marcus started to cry and called for his mom. Jenna heard the commotion and shouted from her office for Duke to leave the kids alone, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop, because something in him knew that every second mattered. He knocked over a side table trying to get between the kids and that vent, and the crash sent Jenna running into the room, and what she saw made her blood boil. The lamp was broken, Marcus was crying, Lily was yelling at Duke, and the dog was standing in the middle of the chaos, barking at nothing, or so she thought. She grabbed him by the collar and dragged him toward the back door, yelling about how she couldn't deal with this today, how he was supposed to be a good dog, how she didn't understand what had gotten into him, and Duke pulled against her grip, whining desperately, his eyes locked on the kids, but she didn't see what he saw, she only saw the mess. She shoved him into the backyard and slammed the door shut, locking him out, and he immediately started scratching at the glass, barking louder than she had ever heard him bark, throwing his body against the door like his life depended on getting back inside. The kids were upset, Jenna was overwhelmed, and she told them to go to their rooms while she cleaned up, and for a few minutes, the house went quiet. That silence should have felt like relief, but instead it felt heavy, wrong in a way she couldn't explain. She stood there holding a dustpan full of broken glass and noticed something strange, a faint smell in the air, something metallic and sharp, something that hadn't been there before. Her head started to ache, a dull throb behind her eyes, and she felt suddenly dizzy, and that's when the fear crept in. She walked toward the vent near where the kids had been playing, and the smell grew stronger, and her stomach dropped because she finally recognized it. Gas, she was smelling gas. She ran down the hallway, threw open the kids' doors, and told them to get outside right now, no questions, just move, and as they scrambled toward the front door, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her hand shaking so badly she almost dropped it twice. The fire department arrived within minutes, and what they found in the basement confirmed her worst fear. A cracked pipe had been leaking natural gas into the house for days, and the concentration had reached dangerous levels, not enough to explode yet, but enough to cause serious harm if they had stayed inside much longer. The firefighter looked at her and said she was lucky, said if she hadn't noticed when she did, they could have been dealing with a very different situation, and Jenna nodded, but she wasn't thinking about luck, she was thinking about Duke. She replayed the morning in her mind, the pacing, the whining, the way he kept trying to move the kids, the way he knocked over the table, the way he barked and scratched at the door after she locked him out, and it all made sense now, horrifying, heartbreaking sense. He wasn't being bad, he was being a hero, and she punished him for it. She walked to the backyard on legs that felt like they might give out beneath her, and there he was, sitting by the door, still watching, still waiting, his ears perked up the moment he saw her. She dropped to her knees on the grass and wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur, and she cried, not soft tears but deep, shaking sobs that came from somewhere so far inside her she didn't know it existed. She whispered that she was sorry, over and over again, and Duke just sat there, still and steady, letting her hold him, not pulling away, not holding a grudge, because that's not how dogs love. They love without conditions, without scorecards, without memory of the wrongs done to them. Lily and Marcus came running into the yard, and when they saw their mom crying and hugging Duke, they didn't ask what was wrong, they just joined in, wrapping their little arms around the dog who had tried to save them when no one else was paying attention. Jenna looked at Duke's face, at those deep brown eyes that had been trying to tell her the truth all along, and she made a silent promise to never ignore him again, to never assume she knew better than his instincts, to never let business blind her to the ones who were really watching over her family. That night, after the gas company fixed the leak and cleared the house, Jenna let Duke sleep in her bed for the first time in years, and he curled up right beside her like he had never left, like forgiveness was the easiest thing in the world. She stayed awake for a long time, running her fingers through his fur, thinking about how close she came to losing everything, and how the only one who tried to stop it was the one she blamed. The next morning, she made Duke a special breakfast, scrambled eggs and bacon, and she sat on the kitchen floor with him while he ate, just being present, just being grateful. The kids made him a card that said "Best Dog Ever" in wobbly crayon letters, and Jenna hung it on the fridge where she would see it every single day. She never told Duke he was a good boy more than she did in the weeks that followed, and he never stopped watching over those kids, sleeping outside their doors, following them from room to room, doing his job the way he always had, even when no one was paying attention. Some people might say dogs don't understand what they do, that they just act on instinct without knowing the impact, but Jenna didn't believe that anymore, because she saw the way Duke looked at her kids, the way he positioned himself between them and danger, the way he refused to stop trying even when she was yelling at him to stop, and that wasn't just instinct, that was love, pure and simple and braver than anything she had ever done. If there's one thing this story taught her, it's that the ones who love us most don't always speak in ways we understand, and sometimes the biggest gift we can give them is simply to pay attention, to trust that their strange behavior might be a message we're not hearing, to stop assuming we know the full picture when we're only seeing a tiny piece. So I have to ask you, and I really want to know, what would you have done if you were in Jenna's place? Would you have stopped to wonder why your dog was acting that way? Or would you have reacted the same way she did? Tell me in the comments, because I think this is a conversation worth having. And if this story touched you the way it touched me, if you know someone who loves their dog like family, or someone who needs a reminder to slow down and really see what's happening around them, I hope you'll share this with them, because sometimes the stories that matter most are the ones that remind us how lucky we are to be loved by creatures who ask for nothing in return except our presence and our trust. Duke didn't need a thank you, he didn't need recognition, he just needed his family to be safe, and when they finally were, that was enough for him. That's the thing about dogs, isn't it? They don't love us because we're perfect, they love us because we're theirs, and maybe that's the most incredible truth of all.